In the deserts of North America lives a lizard that looks slow, clumsy, and easy to catch. But push it too far, and it fights back with one of the strangest defenses in the animal kingdom. It narrows its eyes and then fires streams of blood straight from its face. How exactly does this kill its prey? We'll get into that later in this video. This is just one example of how nature's assassins don't always rely on strength or speed. Some survive by using tactics so bizarre they don't even seem real. From worms that spring out of the sand like bear traps to shrimp that can strike with the force of a bullet. These are killers that prove survival is about creativity as much as power. And yet, even among them, one predator stands out. A creature that doesn't just kill, it leaves behind a trail so disturbing, it baffled early explorers for decades. But before we get to that mystery, let's start with one of nature's greatest con artists, a predator so convincing in disguise that it can walk among its enemies completely unnoticed. The ant-mimicking spider, Myrmoracne, has built its survival on disguise. Ants are bitter and aggressive, willing to throw themselves into suicidal defense of the colony. And because of that, most predators avoid them. Birds, lizards, and even other spiders learn that they are more trouble than they are worth. Myrmoracne takes advantage of this by becoming the one thing nobody wants to touch. Its waist is drawn thin, its body stretched out, and its front legs extend forward like a pair of antennae. Even the way it moves has changed, adopting the jerky, stop-and-start rhythm of an ant on patrol. The illusion is convincing enough that predators pass it by, and ants themselves treat it as one of their own, which means the spider can walk straight into a nest that should be its death and quietly pluck off victims in the middle of the colony. In some places, researchers have even found it copying the specific ant species most common in that environment, adjusting its disguise depending on what the local predators already fear. But while Myrmoracne wins by blending in, others prefer the opposite, exploding out of nowhere. The bobbit worm is a hunter that almost defies belief. Nearly all of its armored body is buried in the seafloor, leaving only a pair of jaws exposed. Those jaws snap shut with such speed that high-speed cameras have struggled to measure them. Some estimates put the force at over 11,000 times the worm's body weight. The strike of the bobbit worm is devastating, slicing prey apart before there's even a chance to react. The bobbit worm doesn't rely on power alone though, because the worm threads its slender antennae above the sand that can register the faintest movements in the water. Basically a tripwire system built into the seafloor. What makes the species even more unsettling is its size, since some individuals grow more than 3 meters long, ranking among the largest ambush worms known. Divers describe the way the sand seems to erupt when one lunges from hiding, and aquariums have lost entire tanks overnight when a single bobbit worm hitchhiked in on a piece of live rock and hunted unseen until nothing was left. But while bobbit worms turn the seafloor into a guillotine, some predators have found ways to make the earth itself vanish beneath their prey. The trapdoor spider is an engineer of disappearance, living in burrows lined with silk and capped with hinged lids of dirt and moss so carefully disguised that even a trained observer can walk past without noticing. Beneath the surface, the spider waits, resting with its front legs pressed against silken threads that radiate outward like invisible wires, each one sensitive enough to register the faintest vibration of an insect walking nearby. When a beetle or cricket strays across the network, the lid swings open in an instant, the victim is pulled inside, and the door closes again with no trace of the struggle above. What fascinates researchers is how tightly those lids are built, because they are not rough covers, but fitted plugs that can form a near vacuum seal when closed, making it impossible for predators to pry them open, even if they sense something is below. For the prey, the experience is not just an ambush, but the sudden, bewildering sensation of being swallowed by the ground itself. But if the trapdoor spider uses engineering, another predator takes advantage of physiology most sharks could only dream of. The epaulet shark is small, rarely reaching more than 3 feet in length, but it has an ability no other shark is known to possess. When the tide recedes and leaves behind shallow pools, where most fish quickly suffocate in oxygen-poor water, the epaulet slows its heartbeat, shuts down parts of its brain, and endures nearly an hour without fresh oxygen. This allows it to move into places that should be inaccessible, slipping into tide pools where other animals are already struggling and feeding at its own pace. It uses its fins like legs, creeping across the reef floor under cover of darkness, moving from pool to pool with deliberate ease. In laboratory tests, scientists have pushed these sharks into conditions that kill most vertebrates in minutes. Yet the epaulet endured, proving that its deadliness lies not in speed or strength, but in the endurance that lets it hunt in places no other predator can follow. The shark's trick is patience, slowing its body to survive, but in the same reefs lurks a creature that does the opposite. Striking so fast, the water itself becomes part of the weapon. The mantis shrimp delivers the fastest strike known in the animal kingdom, swinging its clubs with the speed of a bullet and strong enough to shatter the shells of crabs and snails, or even crack the glass of an aquarium. What makes the blow remarkable is not only the force, but the physics behind it. The movement is so fast that it creates cavitation bubbles, tiny voids in the water that collapse almost instantly with explosive energy. Each strike therefore lands twice, once with the impact of the claw and again with the shockwave from the collapsing bubble. For an instant, the temperatures inside those bubbles reach thousands of degrees, hot enough to give off flashes of light. Prey are not only hit, but crushed by the water imploding around them, which means the mantis shrimp is fighting with more than its own body. It is fighting with the physics of the ocean itself. If the mantis shrimp is spectacular, the velvet worm is grotesque. The velvet worm looks harmless at first glance, a soft-bodied creature with little to suggest it could be a predator. Yet its method of attack is among the strangest in nature. From a pair of nozzles on its head, it ejects 2 streams of adhesive slime that harden almost as soon as they hit the air. Any insect caught in the spray is quickly immobilized, stuck fast while the worm moves in. Once the victim can no longer struggle, the worm injects saliva that begins to dissolve tissue from the inside, reducing the body to liquid that can be consumed at leisure. In laboratory studies, this slime has been found to rival the strength of commercial glues, and once it sets, there is virtually no chance of escape. The velvet worm's advantage is that it does not need to overpower its prey at all. It disables them first, and then waits for the chemistry to finish the work. The velvet worm overpowers its prey with chemistry, gluing them in place before beginning the slow work of digestion. In the open ocean, survival takes a different form, and one of the most unusual examples is a creature that relies on spectacle as much as strategy, the blanket octopus. The blanket octopus is striking for its size and appearance, with females reaching nearly 7 feet in length and carrying long, translucent sheets of membrane between their arms. When threatened, they spread these membranes into a wide cloak that makes them appear much larger than they are, a simple bluff that often convinces would-be attackers to back away. Yet the more unsettling detail is their use of weapons taken from other animals. They tear the venomous tentacles from Portuguese man-o'-war jellyfish and hold them in their arms. They then use them as whips lined with stinging cells that can injure animals many times their own size. In captivity, some individuals have been observed carrying these borrowed tentacles for weeks, evidence that they are not just for display, but tools deliberately kept and used. The blanket octopus may fight with borrowed weapons, but not every defense is so theatrical. Before we get to the predator that left explorers baffled for decades, there's a small desert lizard with a defense so grotesque it almost defies belief. The horned lizard is one of those animals that looks like it should have been wiped out a long time ago. It moves slowly, it's small enough to be eaten by almost anything, and it doesn't have the size or speed you'd expect from a survivor. But its body is built with a series of defenses that make up for its shortcomings. The spines along its back and sides aren't just for show, they make it painful and awkward to swallow. Additionally, when it presses itself flat against the ground, it becomes wider and harder for a predator to get a grip on, blending into the sand and stone around it. But what makes the horned lizard famous is the defense it holds back until the very last moment. By building pressure in the vessels around its head, it can actually rupture small sinuses near its eyes and shoot streams of blood. The jets can travel several feet, and while the sight alone is startling, the blood itself carries compounds that are especially nasty to canids like foxes and coyotes. They taste it, gag, and often spit the lizard out. Some studies even suggest it can cause short-term digestive distress, which would explain why many predators avoid them entirely after one attempt. Predators thrive in the animal kingdom by being unexpected, disguising themselves, bending the rules of nature, or arming themselves in ways no one anticipates. Yet, even with all these strange tactics, there is still one predator more disturbing. A killer that doesn't just hunt, but leaves behind something so strange and unsettling that it baffled early explorers. Skeletons stripped clean and left hanging in the branches of trees. All of the creatures we've looked at share the same advantage. They succeed because their victims never expect them. Some hide beneath the sand and erupt with terrifying speed. Others creep into tide pools that should be safe because no predator is supposed to survive there. And even a shrimp can weaponize physics itself, hitting with a force that turns the water around it into part of the attack. In nature, it isn't strength alone that decides the outcome. It's surprise. Reports from the African wilderness told of a sight that unsettled even seasoned explorers. High in the branches, they found skeletons, not scattered bones picked apart on the ground, but whole carcasses stripped clean and jammed into the forks of trees. Sometimes it was an antelope, other times smaller animals, and occasionally even prey large enough to make the discovery feel impossible. The impression was haunting, skeletons swaying in the wind as if they'd been placed there deliberately. To those who saw it, the scene looked ritualistic, almost unnatural. And the question lingered: what kind of predator would kill and then leave its victims hanging in the trees? The culprit was the leopard, but not in the way anyone expected. Leopards are the most elusive of the big cats. Lions advertise their power in roars that carry for miles and gather in prides that are impossible to miss. But leopards move alone and in silence, slipping through forests and grasslands like shadows that rarely give themselves away. Their hunts depend on patience, drawing close without a sound before exploding into a short sprint and closing their jaws on the throat until the animal suffocates. Yet the kill is only the beginning, because what follows is what set them apart and gave rise to stories of skeletons hanging in the trees. Leopards share their range with competitors that are always ready to steal a meal. Hyenas, lions, jackals, and vultures all shadow them, waiting for a chance to strip a carcass the moment it's unguarded. A leopard is powerful, but even it can't stand against a pride of lions or a pack of hyenas. Its solution is something no other big cat does so consistently or on the same scale. It drags its kill high into the branches, beyond the reach of rivals on the ground. The strength it takes to do this is staggering. An adult leopard weighs little more than 150 pounds, yet they've been recorded dragging animals far heavier than themselves into the canopy. Antelopes weighing over 200 pounds, young giraffes, even buffalo calves have all been lifted into trees by nothing more than jaws and claws. The leopard climbs vertically, gripping the trunk and hauling upward inch by inch until the carcass is secured high above the ground, where it can rest wedged safely out of reach of almost any rival. Even today, locals sometimes speak of death trees, places once marked by folklore as cursed and avoided, where skeletons dangled in the branches as if the land itself were warning passers-by. Biologists now recognize them as nothing more than the practical result of leopards caching their kills. But knowing the reason doesn't strip away the effect. The sight of bones swaying in the canopy still carries the weight of something uncanny. What makes the leopard remarkable isn't only its strength, but its ability to adapt. It is the most widespread of the big cats, ranging across Africa, the Middle East, and deep into Asia. Yet one pattern never changes. When rivals close in, the leopard climbs. Its survival rests on the same principle that ties together all of these hidden killers. Not brute dominance, but the gift of finding strategies no other predator is using. In the leopard's case, the strategy leaves its mark behind. Where the trapdoor spider or the bobbit worm erase their victims into the ground, the leopard's work lingers in plain sight. It isn't a predator that kills and disappears, but one that leaves its victories suspended in the branches, monuments of death swaying in the trees. Every predator we've looked at today proves the same point. Nature doesn't need to follow rules to be terrifying. It invents its own, and sometimes those rules are stranger than anything we could imagine. And yet, for every creature we've uncovered, there are countless more waiting in the dark, each with their own unsettling trick. Thanks for watching, and if you thought the animals in this video were disturbing, just wait until you see what's planned next on Beyond Nature.